I don't think I'm being facetious when I say that Kevin Young has done an incredible job in his first month roughly as BYU men's basketball coach. But maybe, just maybe, the top prospect he possibly could land this offseason may just fall into his lap. Allow me to explain.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, your resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Appreciate all of you who are everydayers right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. The motto is your team every day, and we are your original daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Make every moment with FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet, my friends. It's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Take advantage of it today. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on to get started. All right, let's dive right in on today's show. And some sizable news came out yesterday in the form of guard Elijah Crawford announcing that he is reneging or pulling back from his commitment with the Stanford basketball program and is instead going to explore his options. Now, what does a 6'1" guard from Stanford mean for the BYU basketball program? Let's just put it this way. He is pulling back because he wants to explore his options. And if you believe the reports, and I can report it myself, Brandon Dunson, who is now an assistant coach at BYU, was one of, if not the lead recruiter with the Cardinal to get Elijah Crawford to commit in the first place to the Stanford Cardinal. You putting together what I'm explaining here? BYU is in a very, very good position to land a guy of Elijah Crawford's status. He's a 4-star prospect, a legit 3-level scorer, despite standing just 6'1", according to the reports on him. This is a kid who is an absolute hooper. And the thing about it is it sounds like BYU, via their connection between Brandon Dunson and Elijah Crawford, is absolutely going to be in the mix to bring this young man, I should say, into the BYU basketball program. I'm not saying it's a done deal. Let me be very, very clear about that. So any of you who want to go out on social media and say Jake Hatch is saying this, let me reiterate. I am not saying it's a done deal that Elijah Crawford is going to come to BYU, because as a 4-star prospect, you can guarantee that BYU will be among a host of other programs who will be in contact with Crawford. This is a kid, like I said, is a 4-star prospect, 88 rating from 24/7 Sports, a composite rating from 24/7 Sports of 94.61. He has offers up and down the list that if you look at online across the country. He's a product of Brewster Academy out there in New Hampshire. And the thing about it is, you look at his highlight reel, and this kid, despite standing at 6'1", 175, he's absolutely fearless. He's just as good off the bounce shooting a three as he is going to the hole and getting a layup through contact and one. I love guys like Elijah Crawford. They're unafraid. The thing about it is, in this day and age of basketball, when you stand 6 foot, 6'1", 6'2", you are undersized the moment you step onto a power 5, in this case, floor. Even more so when it comes to higher levels of basketball like the NBA. These shorter guys have to be able to carve out roles for themselves and have to be just absolutely fearless in terms of playing the game that they love. And I can see that from Elijah Crawford. There is no fear in his game. And I think that would be a very, very nice addition to BYU if they can get him to come to Provo. He'd be a fantastic complement alongside Dallin Hall. Dallin Hall stands a legit 6'3", 6'4". So he's got the size that Elijah Crawford doesn't have as the point guard position. But the thing about it is, Kevin Young, you watch what he did in the NBA, he can work with multiple ball handling guards on the court at any given time. You watch what he did with the Phoenix Suns in particular. Look at it. Bradley Beal, Devin Booker, and Kevin Durant are all ball-dominant guard or wing types, and he made it work for the most part. Now, I know they were swept in the NBA playoffs, but when they were out there on the court, the offense felt like, to me, it was not the issue for Phoenix. But I think that Kevin Young could absolutely work this with a guy like Elijah Crawford joining BYU's roster. The other thing about it is BYU still got 5 roster slots to fill, folks. I know that we've talked about Maxime Lowell earlier this week, as well as Berke. I'm going to butcher his name, the kid from UCLA. I'll just call him Berke for now. But the bigger point is BYU's got a lot of roster slots. And the thing is that a guy like Elijah Crawford, the fact that he's backing off his pledge with Stanford means he's probably looking for something different. And he very well may be looking at it potentially if you were to look at BYU and saying, hey, there's an opportunity for me to go in there as a true freshman and play right away. There's no doubt that he would absolutely be able to command minutes. You don't get guys of his caliber very often coming to BYU, but the hope, also say this, is that the hope for BYU is that going forward, more guys of his ilk will consider BYU. That's why it would be a huge, huge pickup for BYU, because if a kid like Elijah Crawford does decide to play for Kevin Young, that gives him absolute cachet when he goes out on the recruiting circuit, even more so than Kevin Young already has. If you listen to the kind of some of the glowing reports that Adrian Wojnarowski was saying about him during the NBA Combine, that was on Wednesday or Tuesday, if I recall correctly, he was effusive in his praise of BYU making this hire, said it was just an absolutely money hire, something that's going to help BYU compete just because of what Kevin Young can do. Well, you get guys like a Crawford to come in and play for you, that just adds to the I don't know, the street cred is probably the term to use that Kevin Young could use on the recruiting circuit. Brandon Dunson, like I said, that connection between those two is absolutely a major, major thing for BYU. And talking with people about Crawford, as I kind of poked around to try and find out about it, they did say that BYU will absolutely be in the mix because of that relationship with Elijah Crawford. I'm also going to add one other name to the mix here with regards to somebody I think could be a very, very key player in this, and that is Chris Burgess. I cannot reiterate enough how important Chris Burgess is in terms of building relationships with athletes. There's a big reason why he was so celebrated in terms of coming back to BYU by the players that were on the roster that were recruited by him. He does an incredible job building legit friendships and relationships with prospects, and he does it in little to no time. That's the incredible part about it. It's a gift that Chris Burgess has, and if he can get in the room with Elijah Crawford and Crawford's family, whoever is in the mix, to help him decide on what his future is going to hold, I'm telling you, Brandon Dunson and Kevin Young will absolutely, I think, knock it out of the park in terms of their roles with this recruitment process. But do not discount what Chris Burgess can bring as well in terms of helping lock down a guy like Elijah Crawford if he is truly intent on coming to BYU, or at least interested in coming to the Cougars. But I am hearing that there is legit interest from BYU, and there's no reason that BYU shouldn't be confident in potentially getting a guy like Crawford to consider them, because Stanford's in an elite education. And I know that BYU maybe isn't on the same level in terms of perception of education, but BYU is a very elite education in and of itself. Any of you who have gone to BYU know how competitive it is, know how good the connections are in terms of the alumni that literally are worldwide. It's very similar to the connections that Stanford gives you if you go to school at Stanford. BYU has got a legit network that spans the globe that can help you do whatever you want to in life. And those are absolutely things that BYU should be selling as they try and bring Elijah Crawford into the fold. And I sincerely hope that they can nail this down, because that would be a major, major pickup and a major boost to BYU's roster, because I think he, along with a guy like Dallin Hall, that make for some very, very fun lineups. And just watching what Elijah Crawford can do. He can score from the 3-point arc. He can do it in the mid-range. And he's, like I say, he's absolutely fearless despite being a little bit diminutive relative to other players on the court. You can tell that he's got no fear, and he's more than willing to go to the rim, score at the rim, shoot free throws and the like. So, man, sign me up. If you can get Elijah Crawford to Provo, I'm all in on this. And I don't think I'm speaking out of turn for anybody watching and or listening to this in saying that I think you would like him to come to BYU as well. All right, coming up here in just a minute, I had a very interesting question posed to me yesterday, and I actually originally anticipated kicking off today's show answering it, because I think it's one that more than a few of you share similar sentiments to the person that sent me this question. We'll dig into that, try and explain it as we continue on right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and the NHL with their playoffs ongoing, and they've been absolutely thrilling, by the way, folks. If you've not been watching what's going on in the NBA and the NHL, I want to encourage you guys to give them a shot, but also check it out with our friends at FanDuel. They are giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own alongside those teams that are competing for championships. Right now, new customers, you get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Simple as that. It's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. No matter what you're into, you can bet on it with our friends at FanDuel. You can do it at FanDuel.com/lockedon. You can make every playoff shot count right now. The best part is you cash in that $5 bet, you win it $150. You can go put it on BYU, the over-under on their win total this fall, or whatever you're interested in, and FanDuel's got the options for you guys. So take advantage of the opportunity now. $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get started today. It's all courtesy of your friends at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Are you sick of watching ESPN or Fox Sports and hearing all the talking heads, quote unquote, embrace debate, but they're really just shouting and forcing you to turn down or completely mute your TV? Well, make the switch to Locked On Sports today. I want to encourage you guys. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every single day to bring you all the biggest stories like they are talking about the other networks, but without all the screaming going on alongside it. Locked On Sports today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right. Had a great question lobbed at me yesterday. It comes from our good friend Andy, part of our Locked On Cougars Insider Group, which, by the way, just another shameless plug. Sign up today. It's 14-day free trial, just $5 a month afterwards to have direct access to myself. Can go back and forth via text message. It's a great way to interact with the show, and it's been a ton of fun. We've been doing it for about 5 or 6 months. Would encourage you guys to join us today. Check it out in the show notes. There's a link there. You can click and join it today. But Andy asked this: what is your sales pitch for NIL? Speaking of name, image, and likeness, he says, I'm having a hard time being all in on it. I definitely agree with players being compensated for being a part of something that brings so much revenue to the universities and the NCAA and bringing eyes to college sports. It just seems like it's starting to tarnish what was once a, quote, for the love of the game, unquote, concept that came with college sports. I do see another benefit that it will keep players playing college sports longer. This is being manifested with all the returning talent they have in fall and football. I guess I just want to have more optimism for the future of college sports. Andy, I think you absolutely nailed what I think truly thousands, if not millions of college sports fans, not just in Cougar Nation, not just in Utah, I think literally nationwide are feeling similar to you. The situation with NIL, yes, players deserve to have a cut of the pie. This is an industry, and we're going to talk college football here in this circumstance, but basketball is the same thing, that legitimately generates billions, that's billions with a B, of dollars for the NCAA, the universities associated with it, and then we also have the trickle-down effect where coaches in college football in particular are worth tens of millions of dollars as a head coach in certain circumstances. Not all coaches are making that. There are some coaches making closer to $1 million versus 10 million, but the coaches have been getting theirs for quite some time. They're rewarded very handsomely for what they do. The players, on the other hand, yes, I think that a college scholarship, and I talked about BYU especially with the alumni connections and the like, those are very beneficial things for a young man or young woman to have in their life. And the fact that you can get a top-notch education that's worth hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars for free, that's a big part of it. There's also Alston Awards. There's the cost of living expenses that are all built in right now that are giving extra money to athletes. But the simple fact of the matter is, in the money sports, as I like to term them, I'm speaking mainly of basketball and football, when they're generating billions of dollars and it's a legit multi-billion-dollar industry, yeah, athletes should get a bigger cut of the pie. But to your point, Andy, the issue is it is affecting the quote-unquote for the love of the game. There are multiple coaches. I've talked to coaches both at the, I've talked to coaches at the FCS level. I talked to one at the NAIA level, funny enough, not that long ago, and other ones now at the Power 4 level, not at BYU. Let me be very clear. This is not coaches at BYU, but I believe that if I were to ask a BYU coach about this, some of them would share a similar sentiment. There is a frustration growing on the part of coaches with regards to athletes being in it simply for one thing and one thing only, and that is the almighty dollar. How many of those dollars can they get? And they're asking that as a 17-year-old junior in high school, saying, Coach, if I pick your program, what can you guarantee me in NIL? And it's maybe not even come from the athlete. It maybe come from their parents or a coach or a father figure, whoever might be involved in their decision-making process. There are way too many people focused on the here and now and how much money they can generate as a college athlete. It is absolutely affecting as you mentioned, the for the love component of college sports. And yes, there's always been money in sports. Let's be very frank about that. There's been under the table stuff literally since the start of college football back in the early 1900s. If you want to go back 100 years, there's been scandal after scandal and just reports of this program's cheating by paying these guys under the table or giving them extra benefits here. And we had the basketball situation with the FBI wiretaps in the mid 2010s that never came to anything. And now all that stuff is actually legal under the current NIL structure. Here's the deal. Money's always going to be involved, but there are coaches. Let me get back to my original point. There are coaches frustrated with the short-sighted, myopic view that some of these athletes and people surrounding them have on saying, how much money can we make right now? Like, what are you going to pay me in the next 2 months? Or let's use an expression. They want the here and now, whereas the coaches are trying to sell them. And there should be more. I think there needs to be more people out there in these athletes' lives, if not the athletes themselves, who understand that, yes, NIL is a component. It will make sure that you are taken care of if you are a good enough player and you can prove it on the playing field or surface of whatever sport you choose to participate in at the collegiate level. But also understand that the future, there is a lot of money to be made after a very short, brief, relative 5, and in case of BYU, 7-year window of your college playing days. In football, if you're good enough, you can go to the NFL and you can make more money you would ever dream of making at the collegiate level via NIL. Same thing with basketball, with the NBA. The incredible part is right now, coaches are frustrated because people are essentially trading the long-term view for the here and now. And that I know that it's hard to tell somebody to, hey, turn down money or to step away and understand that, hey, it's a little more of a longer play is what you need to consider here when money's involved, because trust me, we're all in the same rat race. We're all trying to chase the almighty dollar. I do it in my everyday life. I provide for a family. Every one of you that watching and are listening to this have a role in that as well. Whether you're the breadwinner of your family, you're a homemaker, a mom who's taking care of kids, which by the way is more than a full-time job. My wife is an absolute saint for putting up with my 3 hellions I've got, but I say that lovingly. I love them all dearly, and I would give my life for any one of them. But nonetheless, we're all chasing as much money as we can get. But in college sports, yes, there is a component, at least there has been for a long time, of, quote unquote, you use the term, for the love of the game. Yeah, it is kind of going away. And I think that it's a turnoff to college sports fans. And it may be a turnoff to you. And I welcome your feedback. Is it a turnoff? Is NIL completely turning you off to rooting on BYU in this circumstance? Would you rather see it morphed into something else? I want your guys' feedback on this. I'm soliciting your feedback if I'm up in the night and saying that what I understand. But like I said, there are coaches out there who are very, very frustrated with these athletes having, like I said, they can't look past their nose at what really they could do if they could get past the point of saying, I need X thousand or $1 million before I sign on the dotted line with your university. It's really kind of flipped on its head. And yes, there needs to be a bit of a balancing act to balance everything. But man, it's a wild world out there. The more stories I hear about NIL, how things are trending, it's just crazy, because we used to hear about you needing $25,000 to get into the house of a high-level basketball player. This is pre-NIL, to even get a visit in home with an athlete of a certain ilk, to have them consider your university. You had to pay to even get in the door. Well, now it's really, you got to pay to get in the door. And then every visit they make, they probably want money for that. And then beyond that, when they do ultimately sign with the university, where is that NIL contract and how much money is it guaranteeing me? And when can I expect it to be paid? Like that is all in the mix in this day and age. And yeah, it may turn you off. And I trust me, I struggle with it as well, because it's one of those things that we want to believe. I think every one of us want to believe that these are young men, young women who want to go out there and play their sport at the highest level possible. And I'm sure there are many of them that are like that, but it only takes a few bad apples to spoil the bunch. And that feels like in some ways what is happening here. All right, we'll finish up today's show with a couple other notes on BYU sports, as well as answering some questions left over from yesterday's Q&A session we did not get to on yesterday's podcast. We'll get to all that next, right here on Locked On Cougars. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Appreciate all of your guys' patronage. Hope you guys are all doing well on this Thursday. All right, let's get to some more of these questions here. Hiram Anderton asked this: what are the chances Noah Waterman comes back? It's a great question, Hiram. I am anticipating him going elsewhere as of recording of this podcast. So I'm recording this on Wednesday. Most of you know I record podcasts the night before they go live. And right now, if you would ask me, I think Noah Waterman gets an opportunity elsewhere. It's a bigger NIL offer. We just talked a lot about NIL, money talks, and I think he ultimately opts to go elsewhere because I said it earlier this week on the podcast. This is a kid who I think wants to make sure that he has a bigger role in his final season of collegiate eligibility, and he may be looking at what BYU is doing recruiting-wise and wondering if he's being recruited over at his position as that four-man, that wing player that he has been playing. So right now, like I said, everything can change. BYU could suddenly completely change and their offer NIL wise, and he could decide that, hey, Provo's where he wants to be, and that could change everything and bring him back. But right now, I do not expect him to come back to BYU. So it's one of those interesting parts about that. Next question here. Bryant saying this, do you see BYU as a basketball school in the Big 12? Now, that's a great question. It says it seems like people are going to be way more interested in what is going on with the basketball program right now than what is going on with BYU football, even though football is 3.5 months away. What can football do to get people just as excited about their upcoming season? Transfer portal. Excuse me. Win the press conference. And also the biggest thing for BYU football, win games. Here's the deal. We're going to get to Big 12 Media Days in July down in Las Vegas there at Allegiant Stadium. And I think that is when it'll start to really turn back to football. And I know that there are BYU fans who are jaded and aren't really happy with the direction of the BYU football program. I can't speak for you, but the bigger point I want to make is that BYU football, yes, basketball is kind of this big shiny object because of their relative success they had year one in the Big 12. Notwithstanding they had that first round exit, that was still a team that was picked 13th out of the 14 teams in the Big 12, just surpassed every expectation of them and finished fifth in the conference and got a single-digit seed in the NCAA tournament. Like, what's not to like about BYU basketball? I think it's too early to say that BYU is going to become a basketball school in the Big 12, but the success they had, they cannot be ignored. But I still think BYU football, the biggest thing they can do, win some games and prove that they can compete against a true Big 12 competition and be one of those big, strong teams in the league. And if you can do that, I think it'll continue to help BYU football engender some confidence in them, as well as rekindle some of that love that may have been lost. Let's see what else we got here. If you are Kevin Young, who is on your short list to bring into your coaching staff? Now, that is a great question. This comes from Taylor. My short list, guys that can help me win. Is that simple enough? I don't frankly know names for Kevin Young. I know that he's entertaining guys. He knows from his NBA run, also guys working overseas. He essentially wants to bring in the most well-rounded staff he can have in terms of having reach internationally, development of guys to get them to the NBA if that is their ultimate end goal and they're good enough to do that, but also be able to recruit at a very high level, both locally and nationally in the AAU circuits and the college, the high school levels and that stuff. I think he wants the best guys around him that can do that, and he won't rest until that happens. Now, I've been still expecting an announcement of that at some point relatively soon, maybe today, maybe tomorrow, who knows when an announcement may come, but stay tuned for that. Next question from Taylor. If you were to choose right now, who is your starting quarterback for BYU and why? Right now, Jake Retzlaff. Why? Because he is the most proven option right now. And I know that it sounds crazy to say that because a guy like Gerry Bohanon has a bona fide resume as a Big 12 champion. But Gerry is still coming back from that shoulder injury. He didn't throw a football for 6 months, folks. We played that interview on this podcast. It's not that long ago. I think 2-3 weeks ago. You can go back and listen to it, how long of a trek it's been for him to get back to even throwing a football at a decent level. He was on a pitch count for many, many months. He really didn't let things really rip until BYU showed up in Florida to watch him throw. And I still feel like in some ways he may be kind of pacing himself until he get to training camp. But if he can open it up and show what he's capable of, there's no reason he can't win the job. But right now, I think Jake Retzlaff is the best option. Last question from Taylor here. Who is the one player on offense and then on defense you are expecting a breakout year from? On offense, good question. I am going to say on offense, give me, Pokai Haunga, because I think he's going to become BYU's number 2 running back. He's got some incredible skills, folks, and he showed those during spring camp. I expect LJ Martin to be the lead guy for BYU, but I think Pokai Haunga has got the capability of being a breakout star for BYU this fall. On defense, I'm going to go with the consensus. Jack Kelly. I've heard some very, very promising things about this kid. He's an incredible athlete, and I think he is very hungry to prove himself at this level. So I expect that number 17, Jack Kelly, will be a very, very impressive player this fall for BYU, obviously considering they stay and get healthy. Next thing, Riker says, what about the current team gives you hope that they'll be better next year? And two, what is something that's giving you doubts? I'm assuming you're asking about football here, Riker, because most of our conversations, you and I texting back and forth, have been about football. The thing about the current team that gives me hope is the fact that they got their butts kicked last year, and they are angry about it. Trust me, I have conversations with people around that program. They do not feel good about ending the season on a 5-game slide and missing out on the postseason. This is a program that loves playing bowl games. They did not like missing out, and they came so close in those games against the Oklahoma schools, the final 2 games of the season, from getting that elusive 6th win. They are not happy, and I think that just that anger and the want to prove themselves mentality. You heard Connor Pay on this podcast last week say, hey, Cougar fans, doubt us all you want. We feed on that. You know what? That can do a lot of good for you. The thing that's giving me doubts, the fact that the defensive line doesn't have ready-made options for me, that makes me believe they can hold up against Big 12 competition. And it's nothing against guys like John Nelson and Tyler Batty and Isaiah Banya. But those are guys that are retreads from last year. And how bad was that defensive line last year? It was maybe the chief weakness for BYU's defense. They got a lot to prove on that D-line. That concerns me, because if they cannot hold up against Big 12 opposition in the trenches, good luck, Jay Hill. That's a very, very tough sledding for you to get that team over the top. All right, let's see. Did I get through all the questions here? Last thing, no updates on for some time on assistant basketball coaches. Where are we on this process from Dennis? Frankly, I wish I knew Dennis. It's one of those things you kind of sit there and say, hey, what's going on? And then Hiram also asked this: was there any basketball recruit visits besides what Robbie McComb shared this week? What I understand, and I cannot proclaim to be as in the know as a guy like Robbie McCombs, but as I understand it, BYU is bringing in a number of guys on visits. Now, like I said, I don't have names, but they are working very intently on getting guys to Provo to check things out. Is that going to yield a high-level prospect here or there? Hopefully. But we'll have to kind of sit back and see what happens as things progress here. All right, so there you go. That's what we got for you guys on this Thursday. Oh, by the way, I also want to give a shout out to the BYU Sports Information Department. They were named as one of the FWAA, which is the Football Writers Association of America, of which I am a member of. They've been named one of the Super 11, the best 11 sports information departments in college football for this past year. It's the second such honor for BYU from the FWAA in that realm. So just a shout out to everybody involved down there at BYU. And trust me, they are a big help in what I do with this podcast. So you know what? Brett Pine, Kenny Cox, Duff Tittle, John McBride, and seemingly a host of other student assistants and the like. Big shout out to you guys. You guys are really a key part in making what BYU football is go. And I cannot thank you guys enough for the support you guys have given this podcast in the past. And here's to much more support in days and weeks and months and years ahead as you roll on here. But a big shout out to the BYU Sports Information Department. That is a very cool honor. Only one of 11, like I said, nationally amongst 133 FBS programs to receive that honor. That's pretty cool. So congratulations once again to BYU Sports Information. All right, that's going to do it. A big thank you once again for your support of the podcast. As always, hope you guys are doing well on this Thursday. And until tomorrow, my friends, have a great rest of your day. This has been the Locked On Cougars podcast.